So, imagine you're hired for just this highly lucrative job, right? You're going to be working, I don't know, maybe just 4 hours a day.
Okay, sounds pretty good so far.
Yeah, and your entire professional responsibility is to just manually copy out the Encyclopedia Britannica.
Wait, like by hand?
By hand, word for word, from A to Z. And the only qualification you need for this incredibly cushy position is that you must have blazing, fiery red hair.
I mean, that sounds like a surrealist joke. Or, maybe some bizarre social experiment.
Right, that is the brilliance of it. But if you're listening to this and you know your Victorian literature, you already know we aren't talking about a joke.
Oh, absolutely not.
We are stepping back into the fog-drenched, gaslit streets of 1890s London. Today's deep dive is into Arthur Conan Doyle's absolute masterpiece, The Red-Headed League.
It is such a perfectly constructed mystery.
It really is. Our mission today is to tear this story down to its studs. We're going to break apart the anatomy of a near-perfect crime and explore the cognitive science of distraction.
Yeah, to figure out how Sherlock Holmes uses his unique deductive methods to basically see the deadly truth hiding behind what just looks like a comical practical joke.
Exactly. And we're doing this by going straight to the original source text.
Right, and we'll be bringing in a few other foundational Holmes cases, too, to really map out the psychology of both the detective and the criminal.
Because when you strip away all those Victorian trappings, this story is fundamentally about, well, human vulnerability.
It really is a masterclass in how easy it is to manipulate someone if you know exactly which psychological buttons to push.
So put yourself in that famous sitting room at 221B Baker Street. It's autumn. Dr. John Watson drops in on his friend Sherlock Holmes and finds him deep in conversation with a new client, this Mr. Jabez Wilson.
And Wilson is such a specific character.
Oh, totally. Assuming you know the basic contours of the story, you know Wilson is a pawnbroker. Conan Doyle paints him as stout, florid-faced, elderly, and just completely commonplace.
Yeah, baggy trousers, a frayed top hat. Yeah, he is not a glamorous guy.
But the one thing you cannot miss is his hair. It is a shocking, vibrant red.
The contrast is immediate, you know? You have this utterly mundane man with this aggressively unique physical feature.
Yeah.
And Watson initially struggles to see anything remarkable about the man at all, aside from the fiery red head and this look of extreme discontent.
But Holmes takes this man and his utterly absurd problem entirely seriously from the very first second.
Because Holmes is already processing him. I mean, before Jabez Wilson even really begins his story, Holmes casually drops a comprehensive biography of the man based entirely on his appearance.
Right, he just rattles it off. He deduces that Wilson has done manual labor, he takes snuff, is a Freemason, has been to China, and has done a considerable amount of writing lately.
And Wilson is flabbergasted.
Yeah.
He literally thinks it's a magic trick.
Which is, to be fair, the standard reaction of almost everyone Holmes meets.
True, but Holmes breaks it down so clinically. For the manual labor, Wilson's right hand is quite a size larger than his left. The muscles are more developed from physical work. And the Freemasonry. Wilson is wearing an arc and compass breastpin.
Wait, I have to pause here because this always bothers me when I read these early stories.
What's that?
Is this actually realistic, or is Conan Doyle just writing backwards from the conclusion?
The classic critique.
Because take the writing deduction. Holmes spots that Wilson's right cuff is very shiny for about 5 inches, and the left one has a smooth patch near the elbow where he rests it on the desk.
Right.
But couldn't he just have a poorly tailored coat? Or maybe he leans on a counter all day at his pawn shop. It feels like a massive leap to definitively declare, you have been doing a lot of writing.
I get that. You're hitting on a really crucial debate about Holmes's methodology. It does seem like a leap if you view it through a modern lens, where clothing is mass-produced and cheap and we change outfits every day.
Yeah, exactly.
But you have to consider the material reality of 1890s London. Clothing was expensive, it was often made of heavy wool or broadcloth, and people wore the same garments relentlessly.
So they would really show their history.
Exactly. The wear patterns on a Victorian coat were basically a geographical map of that person's daily physical habits. Leaning on a pawnshop counter produces a generalized wear across the front.
Oh, I see.
But the specific combination of a polished right cuff, from the repetitive motion of dragging a dip pen across paper, and a smooth left elbow, which acts as the anchor point, that is a highly specialized friction pattern.
Wow, okay. So it's essentially the Victorian equivalent of reading someone's digital footprint. He's looking at the metadata of the physical world.
That is a phenomenal way to frame it. I love that. To Holmes, it isn't a trick, it's just data processing.
Right.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture of Holmes's philosophy, we really have to look at another foundational text from our sources, which is A Scandal in Bohemia.
Oh, that's a great one.
In that story, Holmes explains his core operating system to Watson. He tells him, "You see, but you do not observe."
That's the famous sequence with the stairs, right?
Yes. He asks Watson how many steps lead up to their Baker Street rooms.
Yeah.
And Watson has walked up them hundreds of times. He has seen them.
But he has no idea.
Exactly. He doesn't know they're exactly 17 steps because he hasn't observed them. We all have this cognitive filter that blocks out background noise so we don't get overwhelmed by sensory input.
We just generalize everything.
Right. We see a staircase or a coat. But Holmes has deliberately removed that filter.
He refuses to generalize.
Exactly the opposite. He hyperspecializes his vision. In that same story, A Scandal in Bohemia, Holmes deduces that Watson has a clumsy servant girl simply because he observes 6 almost parallel cuts scored into the leather of Watson's left shoe.
Right, from where someone carelessly scraped off crusted mud.
Yeah. So to Holmes, a shiny cuff, a scratched shoe, or the pink scales of a fish tattoo, which he notes is a technique peculiar to China, these are hard, undeniable data points.
It totally recontextualizes the whole opening of the story. Like, Holmes isn't just showing off for Watson.
No, not at all.
He's running a diagnostic check on his client to verify his reliability. If Wilson's physical data didn't match the story he was about to tell, Holmes would know immediately that he was dealing with a liar.
Bingo. But the data confirms Wilson is exactly who he says he is, which is a struggling working-class tradesman.
Which brings us to the actual mechanics of the scam and the architecture of distraction.
And this is where the genius of the criminal mastermind really shines. We know Wilson has this small, barely surviving pawnbroker's business. He has an assistant named Vincent Spaulding.
Yeah.
And right out of the gate, Wilson drops a detail that should be a massive warning sign. Spaulding is willing to work for half wages just so he can, quote, learn the business.
See, my initial thought reading that was that Wilson is just incredibly gullible. I mean, if someone offers to work for half the market rate, I'm immediately suspicious. I'm checking the till every 5 minutes.
You say that, but you have to put yourself in Wilson's shoes in the late Victorian economy. This isn't a thriving enterprise. This is a poky little shop, barely keeping its head above water.
That's true.
If you are struggling to keep the lights on, and someone offers you highly competent labor for half the price, you don't look a gift horse in the mouth. You thank your lucky stars.
So the criminal here is making a calculated exploitation of Wilson's economic anxiety.
Exactly. Poverty forces you to accept deals you might otherwise question. So this quote-unquote helpful assistant brings Wilson the newspaper advertisement for the Red-Headed League.
Offering £4 a week for purely nominal services simply because Wilson has red hair.
Right. And we need to talk about that £4 a week, because without understanding the money, the psychological manipulation doesn't really land.
What did £4 a week actually mean to a guy like Jabez Wilson back then?
It was a fortune. In 1890, a typical working-class tradesman might make between £1 and £2 a week. So this league is offering double, perhaps triple his normal income for 4 hours of work a day.
Oh, wow.
It is a life-changing amount of money.
So it's the greed factor. It's basically a lottery ticket.
It is. But greed alone isn't enough to make a man lock himself in an office and copy an encyclopedia. The brilliance of the scam relies on a second, far more insidious vulnerability, which is vanity.
Yes. The Fleet Street audition scene, we have to talk about that. Think about the sheer theatricality Conan Doyle uses here. Wilson and Spaulding go to apply for the job, and the entire street is completely choked with red-headed men.
It's a great visual.
Wilson says it looked like a costermonger's orange barrow.
A costermonger being a street vendor who sold fruit from a cart. It's this wonderful, vivid image of just a sea of orange and red clogging a major London thoroughfare.
But for an audience familiar with how scams work, this isn't just world building. This is a deliberate psychological tactic. The manager of the league, Duncan Ross, is rejecting everyone in that crowd, finding some tiny fault with their hair color.
Yeah, too pale, too dark.
But when Wilson steps up, Ross acts like he's found the Holy Grail. He pulls Wilson's hair violently to prove it's not a wig and gives him the job on the spot.
And by creating that massive crowd and then selectively choosing Wilson, they manufacture scarcity and prestige out of thin air. They make Wilson feel chosen for his unique physical trait. And when people feel they are receiving a massive reward because of some innate superiority they possess, their critical thinking shuts down.
Because questioning it means questioning their own specialness?
Exactly. They don't question the motive behind the reward.
It's like finally the universe is recognizing how unique I am.
Yeah. And once his ego is hooked, they deploy the actual distraction technique. The rules are absolute. Wilson must sit in an empty office from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m.
If he leaves the room for even a second, he forfeits the entire position.
Right. And his task is to physically copy out the Encyclopedia Britannica, starting with the letter A.
I want to dig into the cognitive science of this for a moment, because it's not just about getting him out of the house. It's about occupying his mental bandwidth.
Yes, exactly.
Because if they just told him to sit in an empty room and do nothing, his mind would eventually wander, he would get bored, he would start analyzing a situation, and eventually he might realize something was wrong back at his shop.
You're touching on cognitive load theory here. The brain has a limited capacity for working memory. If you want to blind someone to their surroundings, you give them a task that requires continuous, low-level cognitive effort.
Right. Copying a dense text by hand requires focus. You have to read the sentence, hold it in your working memory, dip the pen, write the words carefully so you don't ruin the paper, and then find your place in the book again.
It takes all your attention.
He's sitting there learning about armor, architecture, and Attica. His cognitive load is entirely maxed out by the rules of this fake job. He is completely blinded to the real motive. He never stops to ask why this millionaire wants the encyclopedia copied. He only focuses on not losing that 4 pounds.
And this beautiful, absurd clockwork mechanism runs perfectly for 8 whole weeks. Wilson gets his golden sovereigns every Saturday. He gets through the letter A. He even buys his own ink and pens.
He is entirely pacified.
Until October 9, 1890.
The vanishing act. Wilson arrives at 10 a.m. and the door is locked. There's just a piece of cardboard pinned to the door that says, "The Red-Headed League is dissolved." That's it.
Just gone.
He asks the landlord, who says he never heard of Duncan Ross, only a William Morris who just moved to an artificial kneecap factory.
Which is such a funny, bizarre detail.
And of course, when Wilson goes there, the factory has never heard of the man. The entire organization has evaporated like a ghost.
Now, I want you to observe the tonal shift in the narrative here. Because when Wilson finishes telling this story in Baker Street, what is the immediate reaction?
Holmes and Watson burst into a massive roar of laughter.
They absolutely lose it.
And you can't blame them.
Yeah.
I mean, the image of this stout, pompous man furiously writing out the encyclopedia for 2 months, only to get fired via a cardboard sign, is deeply, intrinsically comedic.
Yeah.
Wilson gets highly offended, his red face flushing up to the roots of his hair. He essentially threatens to leave.
But notice how quickly Holmes pivots. The laughter stops dead. Holmes's eyes narrow. He realizes that while the execution was theatrical and comedic, the underlying intent is absolutely not.
Right.
The sheer expense of the setup, paying out over £30 over 8 weeks, renting office space, placing ads, that points to something highly sinister and incredibly profitable.
The comedy is just the camouflage.
Exactly. And this is where Holmes shifts from the passive listener to the active predatory investigator. He asks a few targeted questions about the assistant, Vincent Spaulding.
He learns Spaulding is small, stout, quick, with a white splash of acid on his forehead and pierced ears.
And Holmes recognizes this description instantly, though he keeps the identity to himself.
He tells Watson, "Today is Saturday. A considerable crime is in contemplation." And then we get one of my absolute favorite sequences in all of detective fiction. They pound the pavement, literally.
The transition from the safety of Baker Street out into the physical geography of the crime. It's so cinematic.
Yes. Holmes and Watson travel to Saxe-Coburg Square, where Willow's pawn shop is located. It's this shabby genteel place, a bit rundown. And Holmes doesn't just rush inside to interview the suspect.
No, he keeps his time.
He walks up and down the street, he stares at the houses, and then he takes his walking stick and thumps it vigorously upon the pavement in front of the shop 2 or 3 times.
He's using acoustic resonance.
Right. And then he knocks on the door. The assistant, Vincent Spaulding, answers. Holmes asks him for directions to the Strand. Spaulding answers promptly and closes the door.
Now, Hassan is confused.
Yeah, Watson thinks Holmes did this to look at the man's face, to confirm the acid splash. But Holmes tells him, not him, the knees of his trousers.
This sequence is brilliant because this is Holmes mapping the physical parameters of the crime before the crime has even occurred.
It's exactly like a reverse heist movie. Think about it. In a movie like Ocean's 11, you spend the first hour watching the criminals case the joint.
Right. They look at the blueprints, they time the guards' rotations, they figure out the sight lines of the cameras.
Here, we are watching the detective do that exact same process, but in reverse. He's looking at the environment to deduce what the heist is. He's not looking for the crime, he is looking for the negative space of the crime.
That's a great way to put it. Let's unpack the logic chain that leads Holmes to that negative space. The moment he realized the Red-Headed League was an elaborate fiction designed exclusively to get Jabez Wilson out of his shop for 4 hours every morning, the operative question became, why?
What is in there?
What is inside that pawn shop that they need access to? Wilson explicitly stated there was nothing of great value on the premises. Therefore, the target cannot be in the shop.
Right.
The target must be outside the shop, but accessible from it.
And Spaulding, the assistant who works for half pay, has this weird habit of spending hours down in the cellar, supposedly developing photographs.
Right, a cellar. 4 hours of uninterrupted time a day. What can a man do in a cellar for 4 hours a day for 2 months? He digs.
Which brings us back to the walking stick and the trousers.
Precisely. Holmes thumps the pavement outside the front door to check if the cellar, and therefore the tunnel, runs in front of the house. The solid sound of the ground tells him it doesn't.
Because hollow ground would sound different.
Acoustic resonance dictates that hollow ground would produce a different reverberation, exactly. So if the tunnel isn't going out the front, it must be going out the back. Then he knocks on the door to ask directions. He doesn't care about Spaulding's face. He already knows who he is. He looks at his knees.
Because digging a tunnel in a cramped cellar isn't a standing job. You are on your hands and knees in the dirt and gravel.
And not just dirt. The fabric of the trousers would be worn, wrinkled, and stained in a very specific way from hours of subterranean burrowing. It's the physical metadata again, just like Wilson's shiny cuff.
That's so cool. So having confirmed the existence of a tunnel heading out the back of the pawn shop, Holmes just needs to figure out the destination. He walks around the corner to see what is directly behind the pawn shop.
And this is where Holmes's profound, almost obsessive geographical knowledge of London comes into play. He insists that it is his hobby to have an exact knowledge of the city.
Which comes in handy here.
Very. He rounds the corner and catalogs the buildings. A tobacconist, a newspaper shop, a vegetarian restaurant, a carriage-building depot, and the Coburg branch of the city and suburban bank.
The final puzzle piece drops. The bank abuts the pawnbroker's premises. The tunnel is going from the pawn shop cellar straight into the bank vault.
Yep.
And because the fake league was suddenly dissolved that very morning, it tells Holmes something crucial about the timeline.
The tunnel is finished.
Exactly. They don't need Wilson out of the way anymore. The digging is done. They are ready to strike.
And the choice of Saturday night is a specific strategic calculation by the criminals. The bank will be closed on Sunday.
Ah, of course.
If they breach the vault on Saturday night, they have nearly 2 full days to pack the gold and make their escape before the bank doors open and the theft is discovered on Monday morning.
Which means Holmes doesn't just have the location and the method, he has a ticking clock.
He has to move fast.
This brings us to the stakeout in the dark, the descent into the underworld. It's Saturday night. Holmes, Watson, a Scotland Yard police agent named Peter Jones, and the bank director, Mr. Merriweather, all converge on the bank.
And Merriweather is arguably one of the most interesting minor characters here because of his attitude. He is actively complaining about being there.
Yes. His bank is about to be robbed, and he's annoyed because the stakeout is making him miss his regular Saturday night card game.
He plays whist, a trick-taking card game popular with the upper classes at the time. And Merriweather's obsession with his rubber of whist represents the profound complacency of the Victorian establishment.
He's just so oblivious.
He is surrounded by unimaginable wealth, completely oblivious to the fact that the foundations beneath his feet are literally being hollowed out by a sharper, hungrier intellect. It highlights the vast gulf between the mundane, secure world Merriweather lives in and the desperate, cunning, criminal underworld Holmes is navigating.
Holmes has no patience for it. He tells Merriweather they'll be playing for a higher stake tonight, some £30,000. They descend into the vault. And the sensory descriptions Conan Doyle uses in this sequence are incredibly tense. It's not just a room, it's a sensory deprivation chamber.
They go down winding stone steps, through a dark, earth-smelling passage, and into this massive cellar. The vault is piled high with crates and massive wooden boxes.
Merriweather explains that these crates contain French gold. £30,000 worth of Napoleon's bullion that the bank has borrowed from the Bank of France and hasn't even unpacked yet.
The criminals knew it was sitting there, concentrated in one spot.
Holmes slides his dark lantern shut, and they are plunged into absolute pitch darkness.
Watson says it was a darkness such as he had never before experienced. Think about the psychology of that, Wade. There is no ambient light.
Nothing.
No street lamps filtering through a window. just the heavy, crushing blackness of an underground vault. The only sensory input is the faint smell of hot metal radiating from Holmes's closed lantern.
They wait in that damp, freezing cellar for over an hour. You have to imagine the physical toll. The weary limbs growing stiff, the heightened hearing, the heavy breathing of the police agent echoing in the silence. The tension is drawn incredibly tight.
And then comes the breach, the emergence of the hand. It is so cinematic. Describe the visual Conan Doyle paints for us.
Ah, it's amazing. Suddenly, a glint of light appears on the stone floor. At first, it's just a lurid spark, a tiny pinprick on the pavement. Then it lengthens out into a yellow line as the stones are pushed apart.
Wow.
Without a sound, a gash seems to open in the solid floor, and out of that gap, a hand appears.
The description of that hand is striking.
Yes, the text describes it as a white, almost womanly hand, reaching out, feeling about in the center of the little area of light. It's ghostly, it's almost supernatural.
Yeah, it really is.
For an hour, they've been sitting in a fortified stronghold, and suddenly the floor simply opens up, and the outside world reaches in.
It perfectly encapsulates the terror of the unseen invasion, the intrusion of the criminal element straight up through the supposedly impenetrable floor of the establishment.
The stones are pulled entirely away. A man pulls himself up into the vault, and Holmes strikes. He springs out, seizes the man by the collar, and brings his heavy hunting crop down on the man's wrist with a sickening crack, making him drop his revolver.
But I want to throw a tactical question back at you.
Okay, lay it on me.
We've established that Holmes knew exactly what was happening hours earlier. He knew the tunnel started in the pawnbroker's cellar. He knew who was digging it. Why on earth did he let them get all the way into the vault?
That's a good point.
Why didn't Holmes just take Scotland Yard to the pawn shop that afternoon, kick open the cellar door, and arrest them while they were knee-deep in dirt?
That is a fascinating question. Because from a pure law enforcement perspective, letting armed men breach a bank vault is a massive, unnecessary risk. Someone could have been shot in the dark. It would have saved them a very uncomfortable freezing hour if they just grabbed them in the shop.
It comes down to a deeply ingrained understanding of legal and strategic necessity. Think about the physical evidence in that pawn shop cellar. If Peter Jones breaks down the door and arrests Vincent Spaulding, what exactly is he guilty of?
Digging a hole in a basement he rented?
Exactly. Vandalizing a wall, disturbing the peace. A clever defense attorney would absolutely dismantle the prosecution. They could claim Spaulding was digging a wine cellar, expanding the foundation, or looking for a burst pipe.
They'd just laugh it out of court.
The intent to rob the bank exists only in Holmes' deductions, which a jury might view as eccentric speculation.
Oh, I see. He needs the overt act.
He needs them caught red-handed. By waiting until the criminals physically break through the stone floor of the city and suburban bank vault, standing shoulder to shoulder with crates of French gold and holding a loaded revolver, the ambiguity is completely erased.
There is no alternate explanation.
Exactly. They're caught in the act of a major undeniable burglary. Holmes wasn't interested in disrupting the crime. He was entirely focused on securing a cast-iron conviction.
He let the trap close all the way before springing it. Which brings us face to face with the architect of this entire scheme, the mastermind himself, John Clay.
And the confrontation in the vault tells us everything we need to know about the caliber of criminal Holmes is dealing with. Vincent Spaulding, who drops the disguise and reveals himself as John Clay, is captured.
While his accomplice dives back down.
Yes, the red-headed Duncan Ross dives back down the hole, though Holmes has already stationed police at the pawn shop end to catch him.
But look at Clay's demeanor when the handcuffs go on. He doesn't panic. He isn't terrified. He is cool, collected, and incredibly arrogant. When Peter Jones, the Scotland Yard detective, grabs him, Clay snaps at him. "I beg that you will not touch me with your filthy hands. You may not be aware that I have royal blood in my veins. Have the goodness also, when you address me, always to say sir and please."
The sheer audacity of demanding social deference while standing inside a bank vault you just tunneled into.
I know. Who is this guy? How does a man with royal blood end up digging in a dirty cellar in Saxe-Coburg Square?
Well, Peter Jones gives Holmes a profile of him earlier in the evening. John Clay is considered the fourth smartest man in London and the third most daring. He is a murderer, a thief, a smasher, which meant a counterfeiter of coins, and a master forger.
A real Renaissance man of crime.
He is a highly educated young man having attended Eton and Oxford. His grandfather was a royal duke. Jones explicitly notes his brain is as cunning as his fingers.
It's fascinating because Conan Doyle is tapping into a very specific Victorian anxiety here.
The educated criminal.
Yes. The idea that the greatest threat to society isn't the brutal, uneducated street thug, but the highly refined, aristocratic intellect turned toward malice. Clay is essentially a dark mirror to Sherlock Holmes himself.
That is the core dynamic of the Holmesian universe. If we look across the spectrum of Conan Doyle's work, Holmes frequently encounters villains who reflect his own intellectual capacities, but stripped of any moral framework.
Right.
Let's draw some connections to the other texts in our source material to see how Clay fits into this pantheon of deception. Consider the story, A Case of Identity.
Oh, that's the one with the missing bridegroom, Hosmer Angel.
Precisely. In that story, the villain is James Windibank, the young woman's own stepfather. Much like John Clay, Windibank creates a completely elaborate, fictional persona. He dresses up as Hosmer Angel, complete with tinted glasses, a fake voice, whiskers, and a bizarre insistence on typewriting all his romantic letters to hide his handwriting.
Right, he uses psychological manipulation and a theatrical disguise to keep his stepdaughter from marrying, purely so he can retain control of her inheritance.
Exactly.
He preys on her romantic vulnerability just like Clay preyed on Wilson's financial vulnerability and vanity.
Yes. Both villains construct an alternate reality to extract wealth. Or look at an even darker reflection, Dr. Grimesby Roylott from The Speckled Band.
Oh, one of the most terrifying villains in the canon.
Roylott is a medical doctor who uses his specialized esoteric knowledge, in his case, exotic Indian animals and undetectable poisons, to orchestrate a locked room murder. He uses architecture against his victims.
He alters the house, right?
He does. He installs a dummy bell rope and a fake ventilator shaft to create a secret, unseen pathway into his stepdaughter's bedroom so he can send a venomous snake down it.
Another hidden tunnel.
Exactly. Roylott uses hidden architecture and passages to commit murder, while Clay uses them to commit massive financial theft. Both men understand that the most dangerous threats come from the spaces we don't look at, the ceiling vent or the cellar floor.
But comparing them all, you really have to hand it to John Clay. Roylott was brutal, Windibank was cruel, but John Clay's plan, the invention of the fake American millionaire, the incredibly specific 4-pound-a-week lure targeting a man's hair color, the sheer physical labor of digging a tunnel through London clay for 2 months, and timing it perfectly with the arrival of the French gold, it is arguably the most elaborate, theatrical, and ingenious scheme of them all.
Even Holmes is forced to admire it. When Clay is arrested in the vault, Holmes tells him, "Your red-headed idea was very new and effective."
Game-recognizing game.
Right. Holmes deeply respects the intellect of his enemies.
Mm.
He recognizes a fellow artist, even if that art is dedicated to tearing down the society Holmes protects.
Which brings us to the ultimate question, the so what of this deep dive. Why does the Red-Headed League hold up so incredibly well more than a century later? Beyond just being a clever puzzle about a tunnel and some red hair, what is Conan Doyle actually saying to us?
I believe he is providing a blueprint for understanding the mechanics of distraction and exploitation.
It's not just a story about a bank robbery. It's a story about how our own egos make us complicit in our own downfall.
Exactly.
Jabez Wilson wasn't an idiot. He was an average man trying to survive. But he was made to feel special. He was told his red hair made him unique, elevated, and worthy of a massive, unearned reward.
And because his ego was stroked, he willingly locked himself in a room for 4 hours a day to perform a completely mindless, repetitive task, while the foundations of his own life, literally the floorboards of his own shop, were being violently hollowed out beneath him.
And if you connect this to the bigger picture, to the world you and I live in right now, well, it leaves us with a deeply uncomfortable, provocative thought to mull over.
The architecture of distraction hasn't gone away since 1890. It has simply been digitized, optimized, and scaled up to a global level.
That is a chilling parallel.
Think about the modern landscape. How often are you presented with your own digital red-headed league? Think about the apps on your phone, the endless social media feeds, the gamified systems that stroke your ego with likes, retweets, and notifications.
Oh, man.
They offer you trivial, nominal rewards, a quick dopamine hit, a digital badge, a fleeting sense of being chosen or recognized by an algorithm.
The modern equivalent of 4 pounds a week for having red hair.
Exactly. And in exchange for making you feel seen, what do they demand? Your constant, unbroken, daily attention. They keep you locked in a digital room, scrolling endlessly, essentially copying out the encyclopedia of the internet, word for word, day after day.
While your attention is fully captured by the shiny, flattering distraction on the screen,
You have to ask yourself, what is happening in the cellar? While you are busy engaging with the meaningless task, What precious vaults in your own life are being quietly tunneled into from below?
Like your privacy.
Your privacy, your time, your personal data, the quality of your relationships.
The mechanics of John Clay's scam are alive and well. They don't need you to dig